Right, okay, so the last section on what we were looking at with the turbo leads us into engine control, so the software side of the car. So in this case, Eric's gone with a Syveks ECU, full standalone unit. Really nice piece of kit. Comes with a lot of the benefits of this come not only in the engine control is the safety features that you can also add, I guess, with the additional sensors that you can put onto the engine. Yeah. We've got a couple here. Obviously we've got a coolant pressure sensor, and you can also add various other sensors to parts of the engine to make sure that it's kept within its tolerances and it's kept safe depending on what sort of use you're using for the car. So if you were drag racing, obviously we would have a lot more sensors in the exhaust manifold to monitor temperatures there and stuff like that. So the brilliant thing about this is that integration, not only for power and the control, but obviously the safety. But obviously you've used Syvecs quite a bit, Joel, so would you like to explain sort of the benefits and anything, if there is anything negative? I guess cost maybe is a negative, but apart from that, if there's any other negatives that you can think of for everyone, then yeah, please do tell.
Yeah, so obviously what we've got here is the Syvecs plug and play kit for the Yaris. With going to an aftermarket management system, you know, we've got a number of benefits, one of them being the safety. So say for instance oil pressure, we can cut the, you know, if the oil pressure is below the you know, what the ECU wants to see, and we can put a cut in, a lean, you know, lean condition on the fueling side of things, we can put cuts in. So obviously it's the safety aspects of it, the ability to add additional sensors, to be able to create our own tables inside the ECU. So, you know, if there's a certain parameter, you know, we want to see, or, you know, log or anything like that, there's a lot more flexibility there. We can change inputs, we can change outputs, you know, and you know, it's all something that can be changed inside of the setup of the ECU. And you generally tend to find that, you know, say you're running a closed loop boost control, the actual boost control that you do get with an aftermarket ECU generally does tend to be a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more sophisticated knob control. So yeah, obviously, you know, you do find with most cars we will get to a point where we could potentially be on limitations of, you know, we want to add extra sensors, or we want extra safety chips or something like that. With an aftermarket, you know, management system like this, you know, we have got that flexibility to be able to do that. And you know, obviously with this particular kit, we've got a wideband lambda sensor. So the good thing about this kit, it is very sort of plug and play. You know, it's not like the old days of we had to buy an ECU, sit there and make a whole harness. You know, we've got little boxes to be able to integrate into the CAN networks for all the dash and stuff like that. All the looms and everything, you know, all the OEM looms and everything plug up to the ECU. So from a customer's point of view, obviously it's quite a big saving. You know, if we were going back years ago when the plug and play kits weren't available, to sit there and make a whole loom for an engine, you know, it's a very costly exercise. So I think, you know, from a customer's point of view, you know, it's, with the technologies of the plug and plays now, it's, you know, it's a big step forward.
Yeah, I guess the only difference back in the day was that stuff wasn't so much CAN bus control, so I guess there was less of a loom to make when we had to make them. But but I guess with the sophistication of cars these days and CAN control being so good, it's the better way to be. Like you say, having the wideband lambda there just gives you such good control on fueling. Your fuel demand, it just follows, traces a line. The ability to be able to data log, I guess, when you come to the world of mapping is something brilliant. You can do a run on the dyno. You know, we've all been on dynos. It's all over in a flash. To be able to bring a log up, what it's doing, and look at how what you've been demanding and how it's been following it. I guess that's an invaluable bit of information to have. And also, I guess, worst case scenario, if there ever was a failure, you've got the ability to be able to look back and see potentially what went wrong with the car. So I think from all sort of standpoints of the logging features of the ECU, that's a massive positive to go and stand alone. I mean, we all know the costs involved are great, but and it's not, you know, one shoe fits all. It's got its purpose. You wouldn't put this system more than likely onto a standard car if you weren't going to play with it that much. It would be too excessive. But for a situation where you're going to be changing a lot and demanding so much of the car, I would imagine that this is a really good option. Yeah. I mean, there's a few of these different options available. I guess there's other companies out there. There's Motec and obviously Syvecs that do what we would class as true plug and play. But I guess the benefit to this over the Motec is the physical packaging. Yeah. The Motec comes with a patch box that attaches to the back. It's a bigger package, although it still works. There's nothing against Motec at all, it's a very good product. But this is, in my eyes, a more literal, true replacement of the factory ECU. So once you plot this in place, almost apart from colour and the physical appearance of this compared to it, it will almost look the same. So, is there anything that you're aware of with this ECU that doesn't work on the car? That works on the car now that this won't control anymore? I think maybe along the lines of the radar and things like that. Probably the things that we all hate anyway. Yeah. To be fair, I mean, I know my Yaris has nearly crashed itself loads of times because it wants to stop when I don't want it to stop. So I don't actually, I'm going to put that in the benefits section. Yeah. But is there anything else that you're aware of that, along them lines?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously you sort of brought up one of the main points is one of the, some people may say benefit, some people may say not, is
it's definitely a benefit.
Yeah, the loss of I believe it's obviously the radar system, and I believe it may have some sort of impact on the cruise control as well. I do believe it's Syvecs potentially looking into potentially developing it further.
Syvecs, if you're listening to this, we don't want any cruise control. Yeah, we've not bought this car to go down motorways now. Just kidding. Sorry.
So yeah, now it's obviously there's that aspect of it. So, but it's I think with anything like this, got to sort of make people aware. Some people may not want to lose that feature, so just a bit of an informative thing.
Yeah, and I think though it's horses for courses. Ultimately, sometimes unfortunately sacrifices have to be made if you want to go down the route of power. We don't want to lose features, the comfort features that the car comes with. But unfortunately, sometimes it's just one of those things you have to accept, isn't it? It's everyone's choice. But I think the benefits clearly outweigh the negatives when it comes to a standalone unit if you're going down a road of a lot more power than standard. I think if you were to be doing just a simple exhaust or an air filter and that's all you want to go to, then it probably isn't for you. Cost wouldn't be viable, but it's a beautiful bit of kit. I haven't had a lot to do with Syvecs myself, but I imagine you've run them quite a bit on your GTRs and things. So.
And obviously with the a lot of the features on the Syvecs, the depth logging speeds and stuff like that. So being able to log at 1,000 hertz and stuff like that. It's a very good benefit to them. Like you said, sort of if you do have a failure or we do have a trip or something, we can go back to that data and analyse that and see why X, Y, and Z has happened.
And I think that's really important as well. What you've just said there. Sorry to interrupt you. Is that you can change the speed at what you analyse a certain parameter at.
Yes.
So you can change the hertz speed. So you can literally look at it X amount of times in a second rather than over maybe once in 10 seconds. You can look at it 100 times in that 1 second. And it just gives you that ability to look at the data in such depth that you can just get that map to be, or that car to be perfect. So that's a massively important thing you've just said there. So
like I said, many benefits to an aftermarket ECU in sort of any application. I mean, some of the reasons why we do tend to use Syvecs is I'm sort of a firm believer of you use the hardware that you're sort of used to. You've got the experience with, and every tuning company will maybe have a slightly different view on a certain thing and stuff like that. But if you've got someone who's experienced with that certain one, you don't generally tend to jump ship to another one for for certain reasons.
Absolutely, I think that's a really important thing you've just brought, and we really need to highlight in the camera. If you are building a car of any type and you're going to any level, use a system that your tuner wants to use. Don't go out and buy something. Want someone specific to build it and then buy something that they aren't used to working with, because if they don't know the platform, you will not 100% get a proper tune on your car. These ECUs are very, very good. The platforms are very, very good when you open them up. and they're very simple to use when you know how, but you could so easily miss a section of a map if you don't understand it. There's things inside, as you know, that you can change that you just might miss. So please, everyone watching, if you're established of who you want to build the car, if you want Ignite to build your car, and they use a mapper that prefers Syvecs as their platform to use, don't go and buy a Motec. I just think that's a really important thing to put out. So just bouncing off of that, let's talk about the really good things. Let's talk about the toys. Yes. Forget all the good stuff, the safety and all the things that we love, but we're not really interested in that much. We want launch control, and we want pops and bangs and flames and all that sort of thing. So tell me some of the motorsport features that we can have in this that we can have some fun with.
Yeah, so obviously with the Syvexes, there's a whole range, a whole massive range of stuff we can do. If we go into stuff like launch control, we can be putting custom inputs to be monitoring wheel speeds, or even looking at additional G sensors and various different things to customize our setup. I think that's the best way of doing it. Say from like an OEM car, you may have a launch control, but when you start increasing boost pressure, running different tyres, there's a whole variable there. With the Syvecs, we can go quite in depth, different variables, different road conditions, like I said, additional G sensors, data loggers. There's a whole range of things we can do there to be able to optimise, launch control, roll-in anti-lag. If you do want to go down the route of the pops and bangs and all those sort of things, we can play around with this so much more than we can on a standard ECU. That is the whole basis behind a lot of the aftermarket ECU, is we can change things, we can set things how we want. It's a very a wide range of stuff we can do with the ECU. So they certainly have their benefits.
And I think that's really key, in that like you say, it's horses for courses, what you're going to be using the car for. So in a case where you're going to start uprating the power and you're starting going 50 to 100 horsepower more than you've got in standard, you want to start looking at parameters in a lot more depth and making sure that you've got the safety and the control there, and also the ability to use features in launch control and traction control. And like you say, you start going along the road of being able to monitor different wheel speeds. You could do boost by time, you could do all sorts of different functions for like drag racing, per se, if we go down that sort of field. So I think the sky's really the limit with a good standalone unit, and I think that's really half the reason why you have it. So. Other than that, what else have we got over here? We've got a coolant pressure sensor. So one of the things we've just been talking about is the ability to have some extra sensors. Give an example of why this is such an important sensor.
So, this particular sensor we're going to be running is a coolant pressure sensor. So, as we sort of discussed earlier, one of the Achilles heels of the Yaris GR engine is potentially lifting heads and causing detrimental damage to the engine. So, in a condition where we lift the head, we are going to see a spike in coolant pressure. So, what we're going to do here, we're going to install a coolant pressure sensor in line, so rather than the event happening and the ECU not being able to react to it, if the ECU starts to see a spike in coolant pressure, we can set an upper threshold on the limit and inside the ECU, so if this does start to happen, we can try to catch it before detrimental damage is caused to the engine. Once you've gone to the point where you've lifted a head, you can be into very severe engine damage. So catching it before it happens, as a safety precaution, is always a great thing to do. And like I said, with the such known issue with it potentially happening on the Yaris GR platform, that's why we've opted to go for the coolant pressure sensor.
Yeah, no, I think that's for the amount of money one of these sensors costs, and relatively how easy it is to fit. I think that's a no-brainer in my eyes. This is a sensor that everyone should be purchasing if they're going to go down this route. This is a true engine saving sensor. So you never react quick enough when a head lifts, or never anywhere near as quick as what one of these goes. By the time you know, you'll be through the roof in your temperature, and you'll be into some serious head problems. I've been there and done it. So everyone, buy one of these sensors if you're going to go down this route. If you don't know about it, find out about it, because or speak to someone that knows about it, because it's for the amount of money, it might save you a lot of headaches and a lot of problems. So all that's left, bigger injectors. Yes. I guess with this car, we know it's a direct injector car. It's obviously got some secondary injectors. So I guess the easiest way, once you start going bigger power, is to replace the injectors that are in your fuel rail with some bigger injectors. Yeah. These are 1100 cc injectors, so they're fairly big injector. Is there any negatives to running a large injector like this, if you're going to go down the road of this, or give me some positives and negatives to running a bigger injector?
So obviously, as we're modifying a car, bigger turbos, we're flowing more air, we're always going to need more fuel. So as the demand for the air goes up, the demand for fuel also goes up with it. So obviously we're having to look at ways of upgrading that. One way we can do it is obviously a larger injector. We will get to a point that our injector duty is X amount, or we might say that it might not be at limit, but that's the limit, a safe limit, if that makes sense. So with injector duty, we don't want to be getting very, very close to 100% injector duty. We always want the safety margin there. So say for instance we tune a car at an ambient temperature, and you go down the road the next day and we're 15 degrees cooler than from when you tuned it, then you're potentially going to need a slightly greater fuel flow. Yeah. So if you tune the car to max out to 100% injector duty, there is no scope left in it, for safety aspects, for a different environmental condition to what we're tuning the car in. So obviously going to a larger injector, more flow, and it gives us more headroom for the safety margin there as well. And obviously we'll be going down the road of upgraded fuel pumps, etc.
And I guess really with the Yaris running a DI system, the main feature of the secondary injector really is to clean the valve train.
Yes.
So ultimately putting a larger injector in is not really going to have too much of a detrimental effect on it, because you won't be using it to really fuel the car for its primary use. Yeah. So unlike some cars where you could put an injector in that was too big, this shouldn't really be an issue on this car.
No, like I said, with it running as a secondary, common issue with a lot of DI cars is, as you sort of said before, we can suffer really badly with carbon build-up on the back of exhaust valves in comparison to port injection, where you've got the fuel that it cleans off the back of the exhaust valves. We haven't got that with a DI system. So introducing a secondary system, obviously, like you said, it helps from the point of view of carbon build-up, and using them as a secondary, we're not always relying on them as a primary, so idle control and stuff like that isn't as much of an impact on the secondary system.
And really, we're quite lucky because of the car having that secondary injection system. It just gives us a really easy option to be able to slap some bigger injectors in and be able to give the car the fuel that it needs, rather than looking at a system where we have to add another 3 injectors, say having a dual rail. Yeah. Obviously, I know the Syvecs will have the ability to be able to do that, so you would have 3 injectors running when you want them, and then add another 3 in when you need them. But obviously that would make for an additional wiring, it would make for all sorts of additional things that you need for parts for the car, whereas this is a very, very simple drop-in option that just provides us what we need for the system. So is there anything else that you'd like to add, Joel? I really thank you for your really informative information today. It's been really nice chatting with you. Yeah. Is there anything just before we finish up that you'd like to add about this Syvecs system, or any of the parts that we've got here?
Yeah, I think it's one of those. It's when you get into any level of build and stuff like that, it's defining the point of when we are going to go to an aftermarket software. So it's one of those. It's always consult your tuner. Consult the person who's going to be building the car. Don't just go and be pointlessly buying stuff. You need to design the spec what you're going for, what you're using the car for. It all plays a sort of very big impact on it, and so yeah, I think it's one of those that they're an incredibly good and useful tool, but they've got to be calibrated properly, which any aftermarket software, the biggest thing is getting someone who can calibrate that, that ECU very well, and obviously getting people who have, from an installation process, if you're wiring up additional sensors, being able to, assign all the inputs, outputs and stuff like that. It's a very good piece of kit, but it's got to be installed by the right people and the right calibration to go with it.
And ultimately, yeah, that comes down to the software mapping at which point we'll go into, because obviously this is going to lead onto it. So you're going to do all the mechanical installation, the electrical installation, and then obviously we'll lead then into the mapping. So who do you use for your calibration services?
So for all our aftermarket ECUs, we use Remain from RaceCal. Is probably I sort of like to go as far as in Syvecs side of things, there isn't many people in the country that will come to his level of experience, his level of expertise, and deals with a lot of the Syvecs technical support as well. He's supplying a lot of these products. He is using these sort of on a day in day out basis. He knows the ins and outs of them, and that is the biggest key thing with any aftermarket ECU, is having the person who knows the ins and outs of it.
And I think from that, we just add in as well that I think we did a little bit of investigation into this as well, and it's been confirmed that Romain actually had some integration into the base map that was built into his car.
Yes.
So he literally has had a lot of work or involvement in the Yaris GR platform before this came to the market. So it's quite, he's going to be a very, very good person to take this car to once we've got all this installed in there. So awesome. No, it's really good of you, and like I say, thanks again for your time today.
No problem.
Ignite Automotive, everyone. It's going to be an epic build, so let's see where we end up.
Yeah, no, look forward to it.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Joe.